So, something that I've carried for many years that I never said out loud was the fact that I was gay and was married to a woman at the time that I did come out. My name is Jason W. Miller, and I have spent the last 31 years in a corporate environment, primarily in healthcare, in the administrative side of healthcare. I began sharing my story that I had carried for over 2 decades out loud online, and am now doing that, going to be doing that full time with storytelling and incorporating lots of things that I've learned over the years in leadership and other life lessons as well. When I sat down with my wife that night in September of 2003, I shared with her three things. I shared with her that I had had an affair, that it was with another man, and that I'm gay. And as painful as that conversation was, that was really the catalyst for so much positive change in my life because for the first time, just about 1 month shy of my 29th birthday, I fully shared out loud who I was as a person, and it really allowed me then to live more fully going forward. The honesty of me finally sharing who I was fully, it was a very liberating feeling. There was a lot of turmoil going on at the time, for sure, that when I, admitted everything that had happened. But even despite all of that turmoil, it was a very freeing feeling. I was able to, for the first time, live as my full authentic self. And I actually had somebody say to me after that, they said, "You must feel so much better." And that really struck me because it was somebody else recognizing that even in that time of all the turmoil, the relief that I felt. I felt a huge amount of guilt and shame whenever I admitted to the affair. At the time, my ex wife was 4.5 months pregnant. Um, Truly terrible timing, and I realized the gravity of my actions with the affair, that added a whole other level of hurt that would have otherwise been unnecessary had I been able to be honest and true. But it took me a really long time to move past the guilt, even with my ex-wife forgiving me very, very early on in the process. But it's something that really was a struggle for me for a long time. The guilt that I felt because of all the pain and the damage that I caused. I have long believed in the power of written and spoken word. And, this started for me at a very young age. And it started actually with a great aunt who was insistent upon me writing thank you notes at the holidays, even to family. And I thought that that was absolutely crazy. Why could I not just say thank you? Why would there need to be a card? But, I've really learned throughout my life that words matter, and words matter in a big way, whether they're written or they're spoken. And for me, when I first shared my story out loud, I didn't know. I didn't know if it was going to be relatable. I didn't know if it was going to be relevant. And I was just literally inundated with people from all over the world reaching out and thanking me, reaching out and sharing their story. And they weren't necessarily coming out stories or stories even similar to mine. I have had people share really every facet of their life that you might imagine. And so for me, I saw firsthand unfold the power of my words, just simply being in front of a camera and sharing my story, how that impacted people in such a positive way. I have always felt that stories build greater connection. And I have seen that so many times throughout my life. And I have seen that throughout this online journey. And I have utilized that throughout my 31-year career in leadership. I have found that people, by me opening up and sharing a story, that really does form a connection and somewhat of a bond, even in the workplace. So professionally as well as personally, for people to also open up or also find that commonality. So I'm a huge believer in storytelling. I'm a huge believer in communication in general. I just personally don't ever feel you can over communicate, but I think that stories are just what really provide that human connection for all of us. And I think that's missing so often. I think people want to give just bare bones detail and kind of hold back. But as they're holding back, you're just not seeing as much of somebody. And I've never been that person to hold back. It took me a while to do it, but once I started sharing my story and I really saw the power of my story, I haven't stopped at all. So, on this channel, we're going to be talking about storytelling, risk taking, human connection, and even some topics about leadership. If you've ever wondered if your story matters or if it's too late to share it or not soon enough to share it, you're definitely in the right place. So I really appreciate you listening and following along, and be sure to subscribe.